covering sprint activity that's happened over the last 2 or 3 sprints, so that's 17, 18 and 19, and sharing with you our progress and some updates which we hope you will find interesting and useful as well. So our agenda today looks like going over the web content, which has been a core part of this project from the very start. We've been doing lots of content updates, redesign work, rewriting, restructuring, and so myself and Katrina will be sharing that with you. And then Rob and Sarah will be talking about the exciting work that's going on in the world of eSIMs, which is empowering communities with integrated networks, as well as also, I guess, shedding a spotlight or shining a spotlight on me, which is a really impactful project around making every adult matter, and we'll hopefully be doing more work on that in the future as well. At the end, we'll have questions. So if there's anyone who has any comments or any questions, if you could try and note them down, and we'll save them to the end just so that we don't interrupt or disrupt the flow of things. And if you just kind of use the navigation on Teams, use the hand up tool, I will kind of be out there to rover and field questions when we come to the very end. So for anyone who's joining for the first time, the team, this is the current I guess, core team. So we have Rob, who's our user researcher, Sarah, who's project manager, Miranda, who's currently on leave at the moment, but she's a content designer, myself, the delivery manager, and Katrina, who's our content consultant and works with Libertat, which is a content agency. Okay, so starting with the first contact and web content. So this sprint, we achieved a really great milestone and lots of celebrations all around, and got the first batch of the housing register content uploaded to the CMS and published. So all of these pages that you can see here, eligibility, joining the housing register, how your priorities decided, reviews, and keeping personal details updated are all on the website live, which is really good news. A lot of work went into this from both Miranda and Katrina. And so we hope that this will also help frontline staff in terms of signposting residents, and also being able to understand the information better and just kind of get across the essential information that will help users to make informed decisions. And so you can see here the new landing page, well, not new landing page, but how we've added the housing register content to the landing page here. So there's a screenshot that shows how it's all under social housing, under this accordion. We would like to do a bit more with this, to be honest, but at the moment we're kind of restricted because there's other content that needs to go up on here, and also it's a wider piece of redesign work. But at the moment, this is what it looks like, and this is where it can be found for those of you who engage with this content quite frequently. This is where to go. In terms of what we completed this sprint, the following content: bid for a property, how to use a bidding website, housing help for vulnerable groups. So that includes gypsy and travellers, those who are living with elderly people and refugees, as well as cost of living, which we've called get help with your housing costs at the moment, how to rent privately. All of that content is currently with SMEs for fact checking. So it's gone through about 60% of the content design process, and we're just waiting on our SMEs to fill in any gaps and clarify some of our questions. And then we've also updated the messaging around homelessness support across various bits of content, whereby we're sort of emphasising on front loading, on housing options around being able to rent privately and join the relocation scheme, rather than just kind of, you know, I guess, directing people towards temporary accommodation or the housing register. So just kind of reordering the options and kind of, again, trying to focus people's attention on renting privately and relocation, as those are much more viable options than TA and the housing register. And then we spoke to Michael Legister from the communications team around being able to promote the redesigned homelessness and rough sleeper content. And we were able to send him some copy, which I believe is in Redbridge Life and the e-newsletter. I don't have the exact dates when those are being released, but please do keep a lookout for that, because that's a way for us to kind of market the content and ensure that people are aware that this new content exists. At this point, I will hand over to you, Katrina, to talk about Let to Redbridge.
Hello, yes, so this is Katrina, so I'm a content consultant with Libertat, and I've been working on this project for several months. So yes, as Yes said, we're kind of working on various bits of content. We're kind of coming to the end of that process in terms of producing drafts and being able to update the content and make it hopefully more useful and easy for people to use. And as part of that, we've done work around the Let to Redbridge scheme, which we know is beneficial for both landlords and for Redbridge Council. So trying to encourage people to, hand over their properties basically, so Redbridge can let them out. So we've got initial drafts using the source material that exists on Redbridge Council, basically trying to repurpose that material because it's not really working in the way it could, and try and create a joined up user journey. So we've got initial drafts that give an overview of the two key schemes that exist, one of which is around private rented sector and one of which is around private sector leasing, and just being able to reorganize that content and update it. So that's at preliminary 2i stage, which means basically a second pair of eyes. So that'll be basically assessed for structure and basically to try and tighten it up before it goes out to fact check. We will also be talking to subject matter experts more to find out more about these schemes, because we still have lots of gaps of knowledge in terms of the whole Let to Redbridge scheme and basically how we can optimise what's there and also provide the most up-to-date information. We know that times move on, and internal kind of conversations and processes we can make best use of that. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we've also been working on new content. So this is the area around temporary accommodation. This was an area of content that didn't exist on the Redbridge Council. Other councils do have information for people around temporary accommodation. That includes councils in London and further afield. We've made use of those that material they have as source material, and then we've basically been setting up and having conversations with subject matter experts in Redbridge so that we can assess how accurate that is for a Redbridge audience and fill in any gaps or make any corrections. So we've done that with the first tranche of temporary accommodation content, and this is very much first pass at this content because it's new. We focused on what's essential for people to do. That's the essential tasks they have, the essential needs they might have around understanding what temporary accommodation is, what the rules that they might have to go by, what their rights are, getting ready to move into it and moving on from it. And it should be reiterated that with the update of the messaging on other content, that goes for here as well. So being able to emphasize to people that really your first port of call shouldn't be moving into temporary accommodation, that ideally Redbridge would be supporting you and advising you on how you can look for private rented accommodation and how you can follow that route. And also to emphasize that temporary accommodation, if you go down that route, you could be in that accommodation for several years and you've got much less choice. So we've had really useful fact-checking sessions that have surfaced some of these details and also surfaced more details about the content. And so we focused on the last three pieces of the temporary accommodation content. So that was around resolving a problem, reporting a repair, and moving on from temporary accommodation. With that meeting last week, that was really swift. That was just half an hour, but really so valuable to us because we were able to make some important amends and actually take out some information that wasn't strictly accurate and make sure that was fit for purpose. So that's now been updated and it's now going to be ready basically to go into the publishing queue. Thanks for that. Next piece. And so we have 7 pieces of content basically in that area. So this is new content around temporary accommodation that's ready to publish. We hope very much that that will, if there is a trigger mechanism for people to interact with that content, for instance, using social media, that they would understand that they can read this and get what they need rather than necessarily contacting Redbridge Council, whether online or through phone. Instead, they can interact with this content and get the basics of what they need, and that's around what is temporary accommodation, how the decision is made about who gets it, so whether you're eligible to get it. So again, that's that trying to make sure that people who shouldn't be on that content can basically go elsewhere if they realise, oh, actually, this isn't necessarily going to be a good route for me to go down because I wouldn't necessarily be eligible for it. Again, checking your rules and rights and being able to get ready for temporary accommodation, which includes things like knowing what to do about things like your pets, about things like your belongings, knowing that you're very likely not to be able to take all your belongings into temporary accommodation. So again, this is really trying to answer some of those key questions people will have over and over again. Thanks for that. Next slide, please. And so, as I just said, the other 3 pieces of this, these 7 pieces of content tackle resolving a problem, reporting a repair, and moving on from temporary accommodation. And should also say that, there are links within these 2 related content, so it should provide a user journey that allows someone to land on a page and really answer their question quickly. But also, if they have further questions or further things that they should know that they don't know they need to know, that they can move onward to a further piece of content. And that may be one that Redbridge handles, or it may be external sources such as Citizens Advice or Shelter. Thanks for that. Next slide, please. So this is just a reminder for anyone that hasn't had forgotten, or anyone who hasn't seen this. This was a draft IA, basically information architecture for how ideally the new content would hang together. We understand that with this project that, we have various limitations, various challenges that are really around, how overloaded and how busy people are within Redbridge. So we're working with what we have. So we've been able to do a lot of this. I'm going to say about 90%. There are a couple of elements that we would probably be recommending as next steps that could be really useful that we've seen through the user research and data that we've gathered would be really useful to people, and also useful to staff as well. And that could include, for instance, testing out or prototyping and testing a calculator to, to show how long you'll wait. But that's just to give you an idea. This content isn't just sort of, it's not necessarily just rewriting the content that's there. It's actually trying to create new connections that are much more useful user journeys, as we'd call them. Thanks for that. Next slide, please. And in terms of our activity in the next sprint, so we are steaming ahead with basically trying to get towards the end of doing the web content. We have quite a lot of content that is at a certain stage, which is around fact check, which is basically so subject matter experts can check the facts are right as we've written them, and we understand again that there's kind of various challenges in being able to access people and get time with people. That's no one's fault. It's just the reflection of the situation as is. But the good thing is we have a whole load of content there that if it's the same as the temporary accommodation content in terms of the kinds of meetings we've had, fact check meetings, that hopefully it wouldn't be too onerous to fact check those, that there may just be minor details. That's certainly been our experience in the meetings we've had. And that was temporary accommodation, which was new content. This is using existing source material. The other element is going to be finishing off a draft of content around what Redbridge is doing around housing plans. So this is obviously very beneficial for users as well as for Redbridge, so that people understand that Redbridge do have plans for housing and what they're actually doing. So it's, that's really useful information. So that's a draft of that is being completed. And then the last thing is we're going to be, coming to the end of this kind of phase on this project at the end of March. So as a team, we're basically wanting to hand over various lessons learned, things that we found that could be useful opportunities to explore, various challenges, and ideally some guidelines in terms of what the best next steps might be, and our recommendations around there. And that's really about trying to leave a legacy behind so that that work can be picked up and potentially scaled, because we can see a lot of opportunities with making both not just the online offering, but actually, the whole kind of services, online and offline, work better for users, and that includes staff. I think that concludes me. I'm going to hand back to Yeti.
Thanks, Katrina, for that. So we're now going to move on to eSINs, and I think I'm handing over to Rob.
Thanks, Yeti.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. So as if you've been to one of these show and tells before, you'll know eSINs is the name of a national database that Sarah and I have been working to implement at Redbridge with teams in the council and also with external partners. If you go over to the next slide, please, Yeti. So this just provides you with an overview of the organisations and teams that we have envisioned using eSINs over the short, medium and long term. We started to implement eSINs back in November, focusing on the rough sleeper pathway. So by that, the key use case for eSINs in that context is to enable better information sharing between the housing needs, and in particular rough sleeper team in the council, and the various partners that work with the council to support the homeless community. So in particular, these are the Single Homeless Project, who provide the supported accommodation, together with Project Malachi, Westminster Drug Project, the Welcome Centre, Ramfell, the Nelft, and Healthy Living, Healthy Lives. But that's not the only use case that we're looking for eSINs to help with. So on the one hand, we have how eSINs can be used to improve information sharing with the homeless community. And the other key use case is how eSINs can be used to support community safety team with their integrated offender management program. So in that use case, we're looking at how eSINs can improve information sharing between community safety, the Met Police, and probation services. So those are the two key use cases that we're looking to implement eSINs for. Thanks, Yeti. So in terms of the rough sleeper pathway, what we've been doing this last sprint is ensuring that partners that we've involved so far have access to eSINs and can actually start using it to populate profiles of people that they work with on eSINs. So currently we've got 7 out of the 14 partners that you saw on the previous slide live with access to eSINs. So that encompasses partners involved in the rough sleeper pathway, and also partners involved in the integrated offender management program. Jim Allen from the Met Police has started adding profiles to eSINs, and the profiles that he's added link to he's basically provided active links to other organisations, namely the Single Homeless Project, Welcome Centre, and the rough sleeper officer at the council, because that's one of the key benefits of using eSINs, this ability to be able to, in real time, link information that you're inputting to other relevant people who can receive a notification about any activity about a particular person. We also, Sarah and I had a chat with Tyron from Single Homeless Project about using eSINs, because the reality is that the take-up of people using eSINs has been slow. We had our first workshop back in November last year with Single Homeless Project and the Welcome Centre and the Met Police, where we provided them with a demo of eSINs and basically kind of got them started so they could start using it. But it has been slow. So we had this call with Tyron at SHP this week just to discuss with him whether there's anything in particular we could be doing to support them using eSINs. And he agreed that it could be a good idea. He suggested he could send Sarah and I a spreadsheet of data that we could then upload to eSINs. Now, obviously, that's a good short-term measure to get the data into eSINs, but it's not a sustainable solution, because Sarah and I, we are not, we're both contractors. We are not going to be around forever. So it's important for us to be able to put in place and ensure that organisations like SHP feel empowered and are able to do this themselves. So whilst we're going to be doing, we've agreed with Tyron that we would input this data for now. Going forward, the important thing for us before we leave is to have in place a way in which partners are doing that themselves. Thanks, Yeti. So we also had a meeting with Janet Weeks, who confirmed that she did indeed think that we should be pressing ahead with the use of eSINs by teams at the council and with partners. So off the back of that meeting, Sarah has been in touch with all partners, just asking them to reconfirm who we should be considering responsible in each organisation for using eSINs, so that we can ensure that we have the right user details with access to the platform. And we've also, Sarah has created an area in eSINs that with dummy information in it, so like a template that could be used by the rough sleeper task and targeting meetings as a way of really facilitating information shared at those meetings, to avoid the current situation where information is being shared in a local file, be it a Word document or a spreadsheet, and emailed between the partners. So that's the other key benefit of eSINs. You've just got one unique set of information that everyone accesses on eSINs, as opposed to having a spreadsheet flying around people's email inboxes. So Sarah will be presenting that task and targeting template at the next task and targeting meeting. Thanks, Yeti. So yeah, I think I've been through this, but the key challenge has been just the length of time it's taken to get partners really adopting the use of eSINs. And in spite of, we've had the data protection impact assessment in place and training, that it has been slow getting people using it. And I think, talking to Tyron at SHP, the key, I think one of the key reasons for this is, and it's not that I guess it's not that surprising, every organization has their own way of recording information about the clients they work with. So we're effectively asking them to add a new system to the way they work today, and that is a relatively big ask. So it is going to take time for them to change the way they currently work to incorporate eSINs, but we hope that each partner does see the benefits for doing it. So we'll be keeping on supporting them over the next month. Thanks, Yeti. So yeah, as I just said, yeah, continuing to support partners. As I've just mentioned, on Thursday this week, Sarah and I are going to be facilitating a workshop at Linton House around the use of eSINs with the Integrated Offender Management Programme, where there'll be representatives from community safety, police and the probation services. We're going to be preparing a handover document in terms of using eSINs to ensure that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a structure in place for going forward with eSINs once Sarah and I are not around. And finally, there's a couple of partners that we just need to confirm that they're happy and have signed off the revised consent form that we've shared with all partners in relation to holding their client details on eSINs. So we'll be circling back with those partners over the next sprint too. Thanks, Yeti. So then I wanted to give you an update on the work that Sarah and I have been involved in around MEME, which is an acronym for Making Every Adult Matter. Now, MEME is it's a coalition of national charities, namely CLINKS, Homeless Link, Collective Voice and Mind. And it was established, I think, around 5 or 6 years ago in 2017. And it represents around 1,300 frontline organizations. Thanks, Yeti. If you go on to the next slide. So the key kind of emphasis of MEME is tackling so-called multiple disadvantage. So this refers to people who have a very complex set of needs and are suffering in not just one but a variety of areas, and the key areas are substance misuse, homelessness and offending. And I guess what MEME is really looking to focus on is that central area of this Venn diagram, these people who find themselves with multiple issues that maybe they're not even trying to address them, but find themselves victim of. And if we go to the next slide, one of the key things to take into consideration is the way in which we tend to deliver services is very much around focusing one of those key areas, whether it's someone without a home, whether it's somebody suffering from drug problems or from mental health or in trouble with the law or a victim of domestic violence. But what we're finding is there's a cohort of people who are coming up against all these different services, and they you know, you could call them, if you like, frequent flyers. They're these people who tend to continue being on the radar of these services. So Meme is a way to really try and tackle those particular people who find themselves on the receiving end of these different services. Thanks, Yeti. So we held a workshop earlier this month where we had representatives from community health, social care, public health, housing, strategy, and the North East London Foundation Trust. And it was a opportunity to really learn from people who have had personal experience working in Meme before, people like Janet Weeks, people like Alan Caddick, and also to understand what has happened to date from the work Redbridge has already done with Meme, because Redbridge originally signed up to the Meme Coalition back in 2020 during the pandemic, when they were assessing the use of the Meme approach to address the everybody in government policy to get everybody off the streets during the pandemic. So it was a very constructive session. A lot of good information was shared, and if you go on to the next slide, please, Yeti, that these are just if you like, a summary of the key takeaways from that workshop. The first is the need for one coordinated approach, and even more than that, there was the real identification of the need for a full-time coordinator, a full-time role, who can actually work to engage with each different team and partner around the table of that Meme meeting, to work with them and to really define the caseload for that meeting group by working individually with each partner. So that was a key thing. If you really want this Meme approach to work, you need that person who's got that full-time commitment and responsibility to make it happen. The second one is really the need to be able to identify outcomes, both from for the individual themselves whose case has been brought to the attention of that Meme meeting, having clear outcomes for that individual, and then all the way through to the outcomes from a strategic level for the Meme initiative as a whole at the council. Third one is it's just referring to the fact that the people who do suffer from multiple disadvantage, who have these complex needs, invariably trauma is a key part of as manifesting the issues that they have today. So really having an understanding of how to deal with trauma is a key part of the Meme approach, and ensuring that the right level of frontline training is available for the people who are working in this area. The fourth one is around how we're going to be able to measure the success of introducing the Meme approach at the council. It is going to require an investment. As I said, it needs somebody, a full-time person, to really help gather the momentum of the Meme approach. So we need to be very clear on how we can measure the efficiencies gained through the approach. The need to have a consistent meeting of everyone involved around the Meme agenda and the cases that are being discussed. So it was mentioned that monthly would be the most realistic type of cadence for those meetings. And finally, the opportunity of having eSINs as a way of sharing information between all the teams and partners involved in delivering Meme. Thanks, Yeti. So following on from the meeting, we received information from Sue Tatch at Nelft from the original work that was done, as I mentioned, back in 2020 when Redbridge originally signed up to the Meme Coalition. We've been through that material, and that's actually helped inform us on the drafting of a business case of how the meme approach could be adopted at Redbridge. And we had a follow-up from the workshop with Janet Weeks and Alan Caddick and Adrian Loads, the corporate director of People, to really clarify with them where they felt the ownership could sit within the council of this meme approach, because that's another one of the key questions. Who takes ultimate responsibility of it? Should it be sitting in social care? Should it sit in housing? Should it sit in public health? So that was discussed at that meeting, and whilst there was no clear decision made there and then, there was a consensus of opinion that this is the right way forward. So off the back of that meeting, a business case has been drafted by Sarah and I. We've shared it with Tom, and the next step, thanks Yeti, is hopefully that business case can be finalised and then shared at a corporate strategy group meeting. Thanks Yeti. And I think that's it from me.
Thanks very much for that, Rob. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of the sort of formal presentation. So at this point, if there are any questions, the floor is open.
Before there's any questions, shall I stop recording?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah,
Okay, no
and not
problem.
just questions, by the way, feedback, comments, observations, anything at all.